welcome. It's a small group, that's great. That's lovely. I'm going to move away today a little bit from the technology to start with, and I'm going to look at student peer coaching. What we've been doing with the PC3 project is using coaching techniques to tutor tutors to help students and how they then be using it with their students. I'm going to start with a little bit about what coaching principles are, and then I'm going to hand over to Jonny Q, our student who's been experiencing this coaching, and he's been using this coaching also with Facebook. So he will bring the technology element in there. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's the idea behind the concept and principles of coaching, if you're not aware of them. The coach needs to be two key things: a good listener and good at questioning, right at the top. So listening, we all listen every day, but actually the skill of listening is actually quite complicated and very hard. It's actually very tiring as well when you're doing it. But in order to be a good listener, you need to understand the language, what is actually being said, look at the tones, the ups and downs, the emotional undercurrents, the tempo, volume and inflections tell you an awful lot more about the actual words that are coming out of somebody's mouth. The next thing is questioning. So when you listen to what somebody said, it's how can you ask a question that elicits something more from them about what it is that they want in life, or what direction they want to go in, or how they need to proceed, or barriers that they perceive. So there's certain types of questions that we can ask that are very deep to understanding that. The other things we need to do as coaches is observing, so that's the body languages again, the expressions we're making. I'm quite clearly quite excited about what I'm doing, a little bit nervous in the tone there. Yeah? Eye movements give a lot away, because the soul is the eyes, the windows of the soul. You can read an awful lot of expression in what's going on there. One of the things that we do as coaches is to build up rapport with somebody. We would usually do a little exercise here, but we haven't got a lot of time today, so we'll see if we can maybe do it at the end. But it's when you're talking with somebody, how they reflect your body language, how that communication is actually getting through, and it is there, it's close-knit. And it requires trust and commitment on both parts. It's been about being open and honest with each other. The other thing as coaches we have to do is we have to be very conscious of ourselves, our own assumptions. How often when you have a conversation with somebody, have you actually got the next question you want to ask in your head before they finish what they have to say? So it's being aware of the assumptions and the keen interests you have to start with, and actually let the conversation finish before you then assess all that and make another question. And aware of your beliefs, your values, your personal agendas. We often quite have things that we like and dislike, things we would do and wouldn't like. You've got to shut all that away as a coach and just listen and focus on the person that you're coaching. So that's the art of conversation that we use in coaching. And what we've been doing is we've been doing workshops with our tutors to enable them to understand and practice these principles of coaching. And then they've gone off. They've gone off and done this with some of their students and implemented it in various ways. One of the frameworks we use when we're doing these workshops with the staff is something called the GROW framework. Has anybody heard of the GROW framework? Which involves looking at goals, reality, options, and way forward. It's just a framework to enable you to progress through a progress of identifying the goal that the coachee wants to explore, look at the reality, where they are now, what it is, all the issues, the barriers they have, identifying the options, and then defining a way forward. And that's sort of a big framework, but quite often you can't go through that whole process, so you can take out key parts of that, like particularly goal orientating, just understanding more detail where it is you're actually wanting to go, can often really focus the mind. And these are examples of the types of questions you can ask during those different sorts of phases. The most important question we really like is the what question. We feel it's a really empowered question. Really gets to the point of allowing people to reflect back and start to bring out what it is about. So that's just a short piece, very short, lots to learn about coaching, short piece about coaching and what we've been doing with our tutors. So one particular tutor has taken the workshops we've done, and he introduced it to his second year students, as a means of exploring some learning outcomes they needed to develop for their placement. And they used the coaching principles to enable that process of identifying their learning outcomes and then developing them and making sure that they were the right goals for them. So what I've got now is a short video. Nerves are just starting to calm down now. There we go. That is Jonny and some of his friends. Can you hear that?
With 3 level 5 students in a module called work-based learning. Will has agreed to coach. Give us a wave, Will, so we know who you are. Jay is going to observe. And Jonny is going to be the coachee. So when you're ready, it's over to you guys.
So Jonny, you've got the 6 day outcome though. Which ones are you least comfortable with? I'll go after you. I hope that learning outcome 3, because I hope to be able to improve my interpersonal skills through working in a team on a project. More specifically, I want to gain confidence from trying to forward my own suggestions in that team. And then my other one is learning outcome 5, which is to develop my problem solving skills when working on a project within the team again. To be able to find possible solutions during my workplace for the RFU, which hopefully be put into place and improve the success of the organisation as a whole.
Right, take learning outcome 3 first, the interpersonal skill one. Why would you say this is one of these favourite outcomes?
I think it's a bit broad, really, like just improving my interpersonal skills. I think I need to hone in on one. I've said more specifically my confidence and trying to form my own suggestions, but I think that really needs to involve the interpersonal skills.
What would you class as your interpersonal skills, and where would you class yourself more, your weakest interpersonal skill?
I don't know really, it's like just working in a team, isn't it? I suppose confidence is like an issue, but I think learning, like, because it would be a new team, learning how that team works and like in such a short space of time, like, I don't think I'll be able to get an idea of what kind of people they are.
Do you feel you could make that into an outcome more within working in team dynamics, and how would you see that as an outcome that you can maybe use?
So like being able to, what do you see as like more specific?
Well, you say like reading a team and knowing how it works and how to fit in. Can you not relate to some kind of theory? Is there nothing around that subject area you can maybe link in with an outcome related to your confidence going in within a team? The team dynamics, kind of the organisational structure, you're doing it in the modules at the moment.
Yeah, there's a, I don't know the theories, but there's a theory of the organiser and motivator. I suppose I could relate that theory to the team dynamics. Yeah.
How would you think you'd do that though? Would you go in as like an observer? Would you go in as part of the team, but observe outside, or would you class yourself as within that?
I suppose I'll have to class myself within the team and find out who I am myself. According to the theory, so that I'm aware of, so the exam future theory.
Do you think that hones in more on stuff learning outcome?
Yeah.
I could use it.
I think the audio actually runs longer than the video does there for some reason. Right, so that was an example of Jonny's coaching session with his fellow students. Jonny's now going to give us an explanation and actually explore his experiences in actually doing that process. So we'll just close that down.
Right, so yeah, the module was basically a work-based learning module, so it was a practically based assessment where we had to go on a months-long work placement. Mine was at the RFU at Twickenham. We had to develop 6 learning outcomes to kind of make the most of our work-based learning. And then as you've just seen, we used the coaching process in face-to-face coaching, but then we also, I'll talk about a bit later how we used it on Facebook, how we continued it. Yeah, so the 3 roles there that you saw, I was playing the role of the coachee, who was the participant receiving the coaching on my learning outcomes. And then Will, who was on the right, was the coach, and he was offering guidance. He wasn't telling me how to change them, he was trying to kind of tease it out with me. And then the witness is Jay. If the video continued to work, he gives kind of feedback afterwards, so like external feedback, not from the coach's perspective, but as a kind of tutor, but as a student. And then like how we've developed it through the face-to-face coaching sessions, like that my tutor Nick like taught us the techniques. We've kind of continued this over Facebook because obviously I was based down in Twickenham, and then another one of my colleagues was in London, and another one was back up in Leeds, so it was kind of impossible to do this throughout our placement, to kind of meet up and talk about our learning outcomes and do this coaching process and continue it. So using Facebook, we created our own group who our tutor added himself into as well, so he could kind of keep track of everything that we were doing and have an input if he needed to. But I mean, it was predominantly taken by the students, and we continued throughout our work placement to continue the coaching for our learning outcomes, and like use of smartphone as well. Like we all have iPhones and Blackberries, so we could literally just like pick up our phone and put like some feedback on someone's learning outcome, or put like how our work placement's going, and kind of adapt our learning outcomes to that.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
Your coach was a student, fellow student.
Yeah, a fellow student. Yeah, he was quite old, isn't he? So
So where are these forums?
they're on Facebook, so you can create a group. It's kind of integrating Facebook, which I think is kind of a good thing. Relating back to the talk we had earlier, I don't think it's really a good idea to have a specific educational forum, but integrating that into Facebook, because everyone's on Facebook anyway.
It doesn't bother anybody about the privacy setting.
No, because you can make them secret, so no one else saw what we were doing, and no one else even saw that we were in that group. So it's kind of like your own little section away from Facebook. So while you're on Facebook, you could just kind of click on and put a little bit of feedback. And obviously with a coach, it's got a short bit of feedback, especially from the coach's view. It's just kind of trying to tease the ideas out. So it's only like a short comment. It could even be as long as a tweet, so that can kind of have been incorporated as well. But yeah, future, like how we've developed in the future, we continue to use Facebook for coaching in other modules. So we've kind of taken off our own back, so we haven't got the tutor guidance in this, but we kind of create our own Facebook groups and continue for like a recent module I did was a marketing module, and I was in a group of four other colleagues, and we created our group and we use it to organise group meetings and assist other group members with this coaching technique that we've done, and yeah, apply the coaching skills for other modules.
So, you have anything more to say?
No, any questions? I can answer them. Maybe get any for the next one.
Were you coaching somebody else?
Yeah, so this triad model, we kind of took the part of each of the things. So we had 3 face-to-face coaching sessions, and one of each would take the part of the witness, the coachee, and the coach. So we'd have kind of all-round view of everything, and we could help each other. So like once I'd been the coachee, I understood what it was like to be the coachee. And when I was the coach, I could kind of use that knowledge to be a better coach. And obviously, if it was kind of continued through Facebook and whatever, it could.
Was that off your own bat?
Yeah.
The triads, or were every student in the triad?
No, the triad system was like Nick, tutor, who was there at the face-to-face session, kind of told us what our parts were, and that was literally the first time we'd ever seen coaching, so that's why it's a bit kind of sketchy, but since then it's got a lot better, and we've kind of learned more about each role, and got better at each role and helped each other more. Anything else?
Did anybody not like it? If so, why not?
I think a few people didn't take as much interest in it as others, but I mean, through my experience, I can tell other students now that it's helped me, and I think because it's the first time it's ever been implemented, certainly in my course, I don't think everyone was kind of went in like fully, but since then, and since, I mean, like, you get out of it what you put in at the end of the day, especially with work placement, so the learning outcomes that I made were substantially better in my mind, and my tutor's mind, than others that didn't take on this kind of coaching thing, and then for other modules as well, for the marketing module that I've recently done. We've kind of, I know a lot of other students that weren't in our group that have kind of taken on this, making a Facebook group and kind of helping each other through from each group member.
To add to that, I've just interviewed Nick, the tutor who implemented this, and one of the observations he made was, now the assessments have come in for you, was that actually some of the students had reflected back in their assessments that they hadn't taken as much interest and that they wish they had done because they'd seen the benefits from other students, particularly with once they've gone out into placement and realised maybe their learning outcomes didn't fit or sit as well as they hoped. So the evidence gathering
Yeah,
process was
that's the
difficult.
whole Facebook thing. So if they didn't fit, obviously they hadn't set this up before and there wasn't a face-to-face interaction to learn how to play each role. They couldn't do that over Facebook and kind of develop their learning outcomes throughout the placement, which we could, because we kind of...
It's a blended thing. It's
Yeah.
very much blended.
Yeah.
And was the choice of social media up to the students?
We didn't get... Nick told us to make a Facebook group for him to think, but as much kind of input as we wanted onto the Facebook group, he didn't push us to post anything in this Facebook group, but we just kind of took it off our own backs while we're on
Put it into
Facebook.
Facebook rather than
I think you had that open, didn't you, to a number of different
Yeah, there was
people who used
Facebook
different
and
technologies.
I know one of the groups, one of my close friends did use BlackBerry Messenger and they had the whole group on BBM, so they were just doing it over that whole coaching process.
yes.
It depends which group and what people use in their group, so obviously people use Twitter more.
Yeah.
It'd be more relevant for them to use Twitter as a kind of forum, but for our group it was Facebook.
Nick left that sort of question open to the students.
Yeah.
Some the whole part of the assessment was to provide some evidence of the coaching. Some students actually submitted evidence of that with pen and paper as well as through various means like this. But the technology seems to have enabled you, in particular, to take it beyond just that face-to-face communication and during the made it a little easier during the
During
placement
placement, yeah,
time. So
How many students altogether have taken part now?
the group I think was about 200.
200.
I think
on my course.
the cohort's about 200, but I don't think there's 3 tutors taking this cohort, and they've all done it in slightly different ways. At the moment, we're just investigating Nick's process and what he's doing. I've got the coming on to the next steps here. The current group that's going through at the moment, which is a year 1 group in semester 2, they've actually embedded a more formal approach to the coaching in, so a lot more of the current literature and have a little bit more formal aspect from that. He's just got the assessment process back from that to see how that has worked. You produced posters. Did you put up posters in your round? No. This time we're working on producing a poster that's a digital poster with links out to where the evidence is for the coaching. And again, leaving that technology quite open as to how they use that. But the poster is something they then come in and bring in and is assessed as a presentation. He's also looking at the moment to develop cross-year coaching with interested parties. So Jonny here might be asked or willing to participate in coaching peers from first and second year. So in that way. We're also moving on to looking at embellishing that into student outcome ambassadors, which Janet can say a little bit more about. Expanding it into other courses, so getting more interest now from other tutors to come along and join these coaching sessions. We've expanded the coaching workshop sessions so that we can get more interaction. And we're looking at health, using it as a means to choosing specialities with their PDP. And I've had media approach me to do embedding change management because obviously we're in a big change industry and people find that difficult with PDP. And the final thing is we're looking to offer this as group coaching sessions across the university directly to students to try and enhance that peer sort of coaching between them. That's the future. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about the student ambassador role.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go through, she's going to turn around on me. We're going through quite a lot of change, as a lot of institutions are, obviously, and we're looking to get people like Jonny to work across the university with us, because one of the things that is likely to happen is that the notion of PDP will be is very much more embedded within courses across the university, but also much more standardised in a sense across the university, because it's actually quite varying at the moment as to what happens. So given that this is really working well and with the students on the course that Nick's been working with, what we would like to do, and this is really where the student status change comes in, is really that's where we're taking it. We're wanting to get Jonny and his colleagues on the course to share their experiences with staff and students across the university to try and embed that coaching within the new PDP model.
Will that then, I mean, once you teach them to do the coaching, then they can carry it on through the year, the next modules and the years ahead. So you'd be, you'd have the materials at the first module really that they encounter it.
And yeah, I mean, that to have
to do the coaching.
I think that's right. And what's been interesting with Jonny's cohort is how they've taken it on as something to use in other, quite independently of what they've been asked to do for assessment or anything else, taking it on because it's been helpful to use in other modules. And that's one of the benefits that we find when we coach people is that they start to think in those terms. So they start to think in terms of, well, how can coaching help in this decision I've got to make, even if it's not sort of what they've been directed to. And self-coach as well. And I think there's a number of the students have mentioned, it's helped them to think about the way that they approach things, and they start to coach themselves, which is really, really interesting.
So would you consider making these materials available as open resources?
They will be. Yeah, in fact we have got, open. We've already.
Design studio.
Yeah, we have already got a fair number, because we ran a module last year for a different cohort of master's students, which focused around coaching. And we have a set of resources from that, which we will be adapting and putting out as open education resources through Design Studio and other repositories. So yes, that would be. And also what we're wanting to do from as an output of the project, of the PC3 project, because this is all, Dawn and I work on the PC3 project, which was part of the curriculum design programme, just curriculum design programme. And Nick has sort of got involved with the staff development that we've been doing through that project and has applied it in his course. And what we're wanting to do is then effectively package up that process so that other both tutors in our institution but also in other institutions will be able to take that and do the same sort of thing. So that's how we see it developing. Any other?
Well, just an observation really, that there's the recent work by David Nichol from Recon, his peer, who's looking very much at self-assessment, and he's talking about the way in which students are creating their own goals and managing their progress against those goals, and that seems to be, for him and the research he's done around that seems to be something which that's the whole peer review process, I suppose, which he's talking about there, which sort of in some ways is very similar to what strikes me as being quite similar to the way you're doing it, although it's a slightly different take, because he's coming from a very much kind of feedback and assessment place, whereas you're coming from partly discipline, of course, is about coaching as well, isn't it? Because you're sports science, right?
About business.
Okay. But there's kind of interesting parallels there.
Interesting. So that's recent. Is it a particular project, David?
Yeah, it's just peer review. Rana, do you know? I'm not sure if it's just or not actually, whether it's a HA or innovation or something like that. But it's called. It's sort of coming out of the REAP work that he did, but it's moving into.
So I don't know about the REAP stuff.
It's called peer. And it's about peer review rather than peer assessment. So basically, he's taken away. He thinks a peer assessment is very, very different to peer review. And peer review is doing the sorts of stuff that you're doing, Jonny, which is about setting your own goals and getting feedback from other people around those goals without any marks being involved in it. Because I think that's a much more effective thing and actually reflects what happens in the real workplace. So you get feedback, you have to make evaluations about your own and other people's performance.
This is a way. We're doing a lot of work at the moment on how can the academics give feedback to the students on the way on how they're doing. But this is a way to get the students to think about it in more detail and support each other in doing that as well.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the key things that we got from that. The tutor feedback was kind of more relevant than the student feedback was more relevant than the tutor feedback, because they kind of go through the same thing as us. They've kind of played each role, and they're actually on placement as well. So their feedback was really interesting, while we're on placement.
Yeah. So you're saying your peer feedback
My peer
is actually
feedback.
much more helpful than
Yeah, well, the tutor in that, like, he didn't actually say anything until the end,
Yeah.
because it was our first session, he kind of gave us feedback after on how we can improve in our roles, but actually experiencing the role ourselves kind of gave us more of a,
Yeah. That's interesting.
but yeah, more of the knowledge of how to kind of fulfill that role more effectively.
The other stuff that David was reporting back was, in terms of the research, was that if you withdrawing the tutor feedback, it's feedback is one of those, the NSS thing where people always want more of it, a bit like sort of money, you tell your students you want more feedback and they'll always say yes to that. And what he said was actually the learning was improved where you withdrew that feedback because you ended up creating that kind of dependency. And students then, and they were enabled to become, talking about going back to Helen's agency, but they felt much more empowered to do things themselves and actually learn through themselves and through their networks. And that seems to me to be a different sort of take on
Well, that's also
education.
the principle underneath coaching. We're not talking sports coaching, we're talking the principles of coaching, which is where you are relying on the fact that the coachee knows the answers. And it's just the matter the coach is just there as the mirror or the tool to enable that to come to the surface. Because they know they're true experts in that context and what they're up to, so it's drawing on that process.
Yeah, and bringing out that ability to be able to, it's like you say, not being dependent on somebody external, to be able to make
It moves into that
move
self-questioning
yourself forward, and so you're actually sort of empowering people to be able to think through, because once you've got those questions, those sorts of questions are really powerful. When you find yourself stuck, it's actually a really powerful thing to just go, okay, let's just think through these types of questions. Well, what is it I want? What is it? And you can do that yourself, and that's what we're trying to, and I think it's working. It's sort of working with the way that the students are taking forward on their own. Just to have those sort of simple frameworks actually really helps to get people to be able to move forward without sort of having that support that you're saying, sort of dependence and things.
But selling that to your students obviously was a bit more difficult, wasn't it? Because students sort of think that feedback should come from tutors or the work should come, there should be that one-to-one.
Yeah, but I think actually experiencing it, you kind of realise, like as I said before, about the people that after their assessment, they kind of gave the feedback in their written assessment that they think they should have taken more kind of involvement with this coaching process. And obviously, as this is the first year, if we do get involved with this as a student ambassador, kind of explaining it from like what we found, then it will kind of make it easier to sell to the next students rather than selling from the tutor's point of view.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've overrun a little bit, but we did start a little bit late as well, so thank you very much for your time.